I think this is both the simplest and the hardest question to answer in all of crypto. Because if you ask 100 people, you're probably going to get 100 different answers. And most of them will probably make you more confused than you were before you asked the question. So I'm going to attempt my answer. Remember, this is just one guy's answer, but I'm hopefully going to make it simple enough so that anybody can understand and maybe explain to someone else the answer to the question, what is Bitcoin? One answer you might have heard before is it's magic internet money. Mostly that gets thrown around facetiously or in a way that's derogatory or dismissive, but I would argue that's the answer. Bitcoin is magic internet money. That sounds a little silly. Obviously, it's not literally magic, but there's this quote from Arthur C. Clarke that says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The point being, it appears like magic to people who don't understand it. And part of why people don't understand it is because there have been so many different explanations for what is Bitcoin given over the years. I like Michael Saylor, and I think a lot of his analogies are amazing and fun and interesting. But to people who don't understand Bitcoin at all, saying it's an encrypted wall of energy or an army of cyber hornets, they're just going to be confused by that. So I think you should start from the place of just saying Bitcoin is money. The reason that is complicated for people is because they're so used to thinking of money from the perspective of whatever money was when they were born. We learn from a very young age that dollars are money and gold is money. Whatever country you live in, the fiat currency of choice is probably money. And we kind of end up with this natural assumption that that's always been the way it is, always will be the way it is. And that's really the only way money can work. But it turns out that wasn't always the case. There was a time when humans developed money. I would say it was essentially a technology we developed to help us facilitate trade, first at a small scale and then at a larger scale. So over the years, we've used different commodities as money. We've used shells, beads, tobacco, gold, silver, etc. We've also used credit-based money, so credit and debt, kept on a ledger, which is essentially a sophisticated form of barter, which essentially means you trade me something. I don't have something else you want right this second, so we're not going to do direct barter, but we'll keep a ledger that says, I owe you something else in the future. And then obviously more recently, we've used fiat money, which is state-issued, government-issued money. It's money because the government says so. So if I were to say, well, there's a new thing that's only digital and someone created it to function as money, sounds pretty goofy because it doesn't fit into any of the buckets of the things that I mentioned, what people already think of as money. But it turns out that if you understand the history of money and you understand why humans chose to use certain commodities as money in the first place, what are the properties that made something good money? What are the properties that made something else fail as money? Why did we sometimes use commodities and sometimes use credit? Why did we end up using fiat? It actually takes study of all these different things to really understand Bitcoin. And one big development was when the internet came along. The internet obviously was a way to transfer information digitally. So you have this set of protocols that were built to let you transfer information digitally. Could be words, could be books, could be media, music, movies, etc. But one weird thing about the internet is that there was no native way to transfer value across the internet. So early on, people didn't think e-commerce was going to be possible. So since then, there's been a lot of infrastructure and developments built up to allow us to transfer our existing fiat currencies over the internet. But all of that involves middlemen and trusted third parties in between. None of that's actual peer-to-peer value transfer because there's no native value transfer protocol for the internet, like there's a information transfer protocol. So it turns out that a few decades ago, people started trying to create a digital e-cash or a digital gold or an e-gold, which would be a way to transfer value natively across the internet, especially in a way that's peer-to-peer. So there's no trusted middleman or centralized third party in between. That would be one of the biggest differences between using regular currency, fiat currency across the internet, and using a native internet token. So now I'm bringing it back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a little bit confusing because Bitcoin is both that value transfer protocol. It is a protocol built for transferring value digitally, peer-to-peer across the internet. And that protocol comes with its own native token called Bitcoin. So you have this token called Bitcoin, and it comes with its own monetary network called Bitcoin. You can transfer the token Bitcoin on the monetary network that is Bitcoin. But in order to use that protocol, in order to transact on that monetary network, you need to hold that token. And between the combination of the way the network was built and the token was built, that token was engineered to have the same properties as a successful commodity money like gold. That's why we say it's digital gold, because it has the same properties that made gold good money in the first place. Namely, the most important ones, it's durable, divisible, portable, fungible, verifiable, and scarce. Those are the properties that helped gold become money and beat out other things as money. And those are the properties that Bitcoin was engineered to emulate. So you have this token engineered to have the same properties as a successful commodity money like gold. Then you have this network, this value transfer protocol that lets you transfer that token, send it to anyone in the world. And the additional pieces I haven't touched on yet are that it's peer-to-peer. So there's no central person or third party or middleman in between. It's unstoppable. It's uncensorable. If I hold Bitcoin and I want to send it to somebody else, no one can freeze it, no one can confiscate it, no one can stop you from making that transaction. In addition to that, the way the network is set up, there's this immutable ledger. Immutable means no one can change the ledger. There's no third party keeping track of the ledger, and there's no entity or group of people who can change the ledger. You don't have to trust any third party to say that a transaction is valid. You only have to trust the technology itself, the cryptography, the math, the algorithms, the entire network itself. So of course, there's still trust involved, but you're not trusting any human or group of humans who could then have the ability to change the rules or to stop you from participating for any arbitrary reason. So the last piece I haven't really mentioned yet is the finality of scarcity, the total supply cap of the amount of tokens that will ever exist on the network. Again, that's another piece of removing trust from any other group. So nobody can change the scheduled supply issuance, so the rate or amount of new Bitcoin being entered into the network, and nobody can change the total amount of tokens that will ever exist on the network. That means when you hold a certain number of tokens, you could hold 1 Bitcoin, or you could hold a certain amount of Satoshis, which are a subdivided unit of Bitcoin. So there's 100 million Satoshis in 1 Bitcoin. Whatever amount of that token that you hold, you can trust that mathematically your percentage of the overall total supply of the network can't be diluted. What that means is it has the ability to maintain its purchasing power into the future. There's basically no other money or no other commodity that's as fixed in supply and where the rate of supply can't be changed based on the amount of demand that comes in. Now, there's a million other things that go into Bitcoin and how the network was created and how it works and how those new Bitcoins are issued and how they have this unforgeable costliness to mine new Bitcoins. Just like it takes real world energy and resources to mine gold out of the ground, it takes real world energy and resources to mine Bitcoin. And there are very sophisticated, very important reasons for why that's true. Namely, that's part of what makes the ledger immutable so that no one can change it and so that no one can change the rules or that total supply that I mentioned. But in my opinion, if someone says, what is Bitcoin? Going all the way into the energy and the mining and all those things, it gets pretty confusing pretty fast. So I would say those are deeper second, third layer questions that if someone wants to understand more about the technological mechanisms or dig deeper into anything I said already, that's where those things come into play. But again, this is just one man's opinion. I think the answer to the question, what is Bitcoin? The answer, Bitcoin is money. Of course, as usual, if you disagree, feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to ask a question. But I definitely ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with somebody else who you think either might enjoy it or who's ever asked the question, what is Bitcoin? If you think this answer was useful, share it with them. And as always, don't ever forget, Bitcoin's inevitable. See you in the next video.